speaker of the day, a keynote speaker, and that will be Denelle Dixon. Denelle, I am so excited to have you here, and I know that you are representing the Stellar Foundation, and you guys are doing some amazing, amazing job. I'm just gonna hand over to you, and yeah, just do your thing. I'm just gonna sit back, relax. It's been a long day for me, and enjoy you talking. Okay, so go ahead.
Thank you so much, John. It's such a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it. So we're going to get right into it. All right. So I'm thrilled to have been invited here to speak today with you all about the Stellar Network and how it connects the world's financial infrastructure, particularly in Africa, for use cases like cross-border payments and remittances. So as John said, I'm Denelle Dixon, the CEO of the Stellar Development Foundation, where our mission is to leverage blockchain technology to drive equitable access to the global financial system. So some of you may or may not be familiar with Stellar. So in our brief time together today, we're going to try to tackle as much of this as we can, starting with an introduction of who we are at the Stellar Development Foundation and an overview of Stellar, how it works, what it was designed to do in the payment space, and its most powerful features. So we'll talk about the business building on Stellar today, and you'll get to hear from one of them. Richard Lema, who's the COO of ClickPesa, will be joining me to discuss how ClickPesa accomplishes its mission by serving as an anchor on the Stellar network. And of course, we're going to leave time at the end to answer any questions that you have. But let me kick us off by sharing who we are at the Stellar Development Foundation. We call it SDF for short, and the role we play in the blockchain industry. So SDF is a nonprofit organization. It was founded in 2014 to support the development and growth of the open source Stellar network. So with Stellar, SDF seeks to unlock the world's economic potential by making money more fluid, markets more open, and people more empowered. The foundation helps maintain Stellar's code base, supports the technical and business communities around Stellar, and is a speaking partner to regulators and institutions. So everything the SDF does is aimed at making the network as a whole successful. We exist in part because today's financial system just isn't working for everyone. So while advancements in technology have made it so that information can be shared instantly with anyone in the world from anywhere in the world, that isn't the same that it's not true for money and for value transfer. Today's payments landscape is slow, it's costly, and it relies on unchanged legacy systems. Of the hundreds of different monetary systems all around the world, each has its own unique set of services. So think ACH and SEPA, and connections to the parallel systems outside its borders. So assets exist in siloed databases across disparate payment schemes. And it takes a lot of time and resources to interoperate between systems. So all of these disparate banks, money transfer operators, and treasuries combine to make up the entire global financial system as we know it today. At its best, today's system is slow, cumbersome, and fraught with fees. But at its worst, it leaves millions of people out of it. They don't have access to traditional financial infrastructure. So here's where we come in. Blockchain technology provides a new foundation for us to think about money, presenting the opportunity to make the transfer of value better, more effective, and more efficient. In much the same way that the internet democratized access to information, we believe blockchain can democratize access to the financial system. It can make sending value around the world as easy as sending an email. So Stellar, which is what I'm going to talk about today, is a blockchain network designed to become the next global payment standard. It's intended to enhance rather than supplant the existing financial system, which is important, and that's something that we talk to regulators about all the time. To understand how Stellar can set the global payment standard, I want to start by explaining what Stellar is. Because while the average consumer might not need to know how this technology works, all of you may be able to leverage this technology to serve consumers and citizens alike. So, what is Stellar? At a high level, Stellar is a decentralized open network that connects the world's financial structure. I guess that's all I got to say, right? Kidding. No, it's a global public blockchain that is built for interoperability and to further financial access and inclusion. So it does that by helping to make this money more fluid, thanks to the speed and scale of the Stellar blockchain to transfer this value. It helps make the markets more open because when financial infrastructure is connected, You have greater geographical and affordable access to markets. And ultimately, it empowers humans, people like us, because it gives them real ownership of the value they have in their possession. So how does Stellar manage to do all of those things? To understand how Stellar connects financial systems so they can work together on a single platform, we're going to delve a little bit into the following three questions. So one, how is value represented on Stellar? Two, how does value move on Stellar? And three, why should you build on Stellar? So let's start with the first one. How is value represented on Stellar? So Stellar allows anyone to create a redeemable, tradable representation of any asset in a few simple lines of code. Often we call these assets digital tokens. Token issuance is the backbone of the Stellar network. It's how Stellar connects the world's currencies, and it's what Stellar was built for. So you can issue a token that represents anything from corn bushels to gold to an hour of your time as a consultant. But to be honest, tokens are most useful when they're tied to fiat currency, such as dollars or yuan or euros. So these fiat-backed tokens are issued by regulated financial institutions, money service businesses, or fintech companies that we call anchors. Anchors help create a world where the existing financial system is connected to and interoperable with Stellar. They serve as what we call the on and off ramps for the network. An anchor connects Stellar to a local banking system and handles regulatory compliance by doing things like collecting your know your customer, or as we call it, KYC information, so users can make deposits and withdrawals. A user obtains a Stellar network asset by depositing traditional currency with an anchor using traditional rails, like think credit cards or wire transfers, or so any of the ACH or SEPA. They can then hold that asset in a Stellar wallet or an application, use it to make payments or to trade it for other assets on the network, or frankly, just to hold it. Anchors maintain fiat reserves equivalent to the value of issued tokens, so users can redeem them back to fiat at any time. We call this one-to-one backing. So when people hold the tokens, they treat them just like traditional money because they know that they're exchangeable for traditional money in the end. So we're working with anchors, these financial institutions, from all over the world to build what we call the Anchor Network. We've grown to more than 20 anchor services with many more in progress. Stellar powers each of these entities and so many more as they are solving the prevalent needs in their regional markets. Each of these entities from all parts of the world comprise our ecosystem and are part of the solution that we are collectively building as we seek to achieve a world in which where you live and what you have no longer should prohibit you from participating in the financial system. It's actually super simple to us. Equitable access is not a privilege, it's a right. This map isn't about potential. It shows the achievements blockchain has already made, connecting global financial infrastructure. And that's what Stellar was created for and what SDF is set to support. The blockchain future isn't something like really distant. It's now. This progress is born of fostering new products and new relationships. So remember this map because we're going to come back to it in just a bit. But first, I want to explain a little bit more about our technology. So now that you understand how Stellar was designed for asset issuance and how assets like the US dollar are represented as tokens on the Stellar network, and that anchors provide the on and off ramps for these tokens, let's go just a level deeper. How does this value actually move on Stellar? So value can be moved in three ways. The simplest and most common way to move value on Stellar is to make a payment. So I send USD and you receive USD. So instead of sending value to another user, I can also trade an asset. So this is the second way. I can trade an asset that I hold for an asset on the network. So I sell USD for euro. And finally, the third way, I can combine the two in a path payment, which allows me to send one currency and have the recipient receive another. So I send USD, you receive euro. Trades and path payments are possible because Stellar has a built-in decentralized exchange. So in addition to tracking balances, just as Bitcoin and Ethereum do, Stellar also tracks and settles trades in a decentralized, ownerless way. It has common built-in order books called the decentralized exchange. We call it the DEX for short. Every token on Stellar is exchangeable with every other token on the network. And the Stellar protocol itself connects buyers and sellers with each other. So users can submit their bids or asks to the public network via a simple operation. And with every ledger close, compatible trades will automatically resolve without the use of intermediaries. So the decentralized exchange facilitates universal currency conversion, which is not only great for traders, but it's also really great for cross-border, cross-currency transaction called path payments. So a path payment allows a user to send one currency and have the recipient receive another. Just a super powerful innovation for international payments. So for example, an American company can pay an invoice in Mexico by spending dollar tokens, because they may hold those, while the vendor receives peso tokens in Mexico. Neither side incurs exchange risk or delays. Both sides get only the currency that they want, but Stellar automatically finds the best conversion rate via the DEX. So path payments are the fulfillment of Stellar's interoperability promise. Value flows seamlessly from one account to another account in whatever form is most useful. And each of these payments can happen on Stellar in 3 to 5 seconds. So it all starts with the ledger. Users, which could be a wallet holder, users of other apps that can be consumer or B2B, wherever they are in the world, submit transactions to send and exchange assets on the network. They can move funds anywhere in the world and convert currencies along the way, thanks to a native token. The asset issuers here determine where and how their digital assets are used. So Stellar offers heightened compliance and control with what we refer to as authorization required. Stellar's technology enables anyone who is issued a token to require authorization before anyone can hold or transact with their token. Now, this is just a piece of the technology that someone can choose to use. But if they do use it, that means that in addition to performing checks at the on and off ramp, an asset issuer can set it up so that their token can't be sent without their authorization. Meaning they can run required checks, whether those are KYC or anti-money laundering or any additional checks they want or are required pending the regulation applicable to the asset or function being performed before anyone holds their token. So these transactions are bundled into sets, confirmed by validating nodes and applied to the ledger, at which point they're final and they create an immutable record. And the whole process starts over again. Again, that's in 3 to 5 seconds. You have the baseline about how Stellar represents and moves value. So let's talk a little bit more about why people are building on Stellar today. So I've touched on some of Stellar's more compelling features: asset issuance, speed, cost, compliance, but there are many more. So let me spend a minute here sharing some of the features and functionality that I think make Stellar such a powerful technology. First, Stellar is fast and affordable. Transactions are confirmed, as I said before, in 3 to 5 seconds, and transactions on the network for the companies and developers are negligible. High enough to deter the transaction costs are negligible, high enough to deter the bad actors, but low enough to keep it accessible to global developers. Another key feature that I touched on earlier is compliance. Regulations and compliance aren't new to blockchain. Businesses in this space have to follow existing regulations that apply to the functions or service that they are providing to their users. So in the payment space, anti-money laundering and know your customer regulations exist to protect against illicit transactions like terrorist financing, fraud, or money laundering. So in short, any bad actors trying to hide what they are really up to. So for example, if you created an asset on Stellar and you offer your users a custodial wallet as an on and off ramp to move that asset to and from fiat currencies in the real world, Stellar has built-in functionality that makes it easy for businesses on the network to perform processes like KYC, know your customer, and AML, anti-money laundering checks, before accepting deposits or honoring withdrawals. These are built in at the protocol level. So again, easy to access, easy to use, no complicated coding required. The network also has a compliance protocol for sending and receiving institutions to use to share that KYC and AML information about the senders and recipients of the transactions so they can share it with other institutions that they're sending value to. Stellar is open source and supports common development languages like Java, comprehensive documentation. We really pride ourselves on the documentation. We focus a lot on trying to make it easy and accessible for you to get started. Developers can quickly build and operate on the network due to the inherent functionality and expansive support resources, including an on-chain decentralized order book, that's the DEX, fast close time, 5 seconds for the ledgers, negligible transaction costs, it's actually 1 stroop, which is a very tiny amount of lumen, and the ease of creating new assets. A test network, comprehensive tutorials, well-documented, straightforward SDKs in many languages, and an engaged existing ecosystem that is eager to help projects gain traction immediately. So for example, there's trading that's available on Stellar X and other exchanges and sites out there, and there are so many wallets. All this means developers can focus on their product and the needs for what the users in their region have. And one last one I want to highlight is sustainability. So not all blockchains achieve consensus in the same way. And certain consensus mechanisms consume enormous amounts of energy resources. So our consensus protocol is not proof of work or proof of stake. It's FBA, which is a federated Byzantine agreement. And that means it requires the energy it takes just to run a server. So I have one more question left to address. Who is Stellar for? Stellar is an open participation, permissionless network. So really anyone can build anything that they can imagine on Stellar. But generally, it's used by companies offering financial products and services who take advantage of its features to build better solutions to real-world problems. So let's come back to that anchor map I showed you so that we can talk about how businesses are building out these anchor services globally to connect financial infrastructure, especially across Africa. According to a World Bank forecast, remittance flows to sub-Saharan African countries were expected to dip by 23.1% in 2020 due to people having less funds to send back home during a pandemic, but inch back up by 4% in 2021. This slow recovery indicates that any progress made to make payments easier, faster, and cheaper can only benefit those who need them the most. So thanks to the work of our BD and ecosystem teams, our business development and ecosystem teams, several financial institutions have really established themselves as Stellar anchors, such as Cowrie, Flutterwave, ClickPesa, and Uruhu. Now, customers can use these anchors to send and receive payments at a fraction of what they would have to pay at traditional financial institutions with faster settlement times. These anchors are also primed to partner with other anchors, often located in other regions with different currencies, thus expanding their businesses to markets where they couldn't access before. Perfect. So I'll just say about ClickPesa, they are an anchor on the Stellar network. I really hope that you get to hear from Richard. They focus on the small to medium-sized businesses, and it's pretty great, all the available tools they have for all of you out there to be able to leverage. So let's go to the Q&A section now, and then hopefully Richard can join us.
Great presentation, Denelle, and I'm going to help you with the Q&A. And yes, indeed, I'm hoping that he will be able to join back, as I saw him earlier as well. So one of the question that I have on the Q&A section here is that you've mentioned that euro or dollar or yen or peso, but does it work with any other African currency such as XOF? Would you say that besides XOF, any other African currency can actually work with the Stellar network? If so, what will be the requirement for any other, for example, from the DRC to Namibia to Malawi to Zimbabwe even? What will be the requirements to make it work?
So right now we have a Nigerian asset. It's called the Naira, so the NGNT. It's called the NGNT for the Naira. So that asset is available because we actually have Cowrie, who is an issuing anchor in Nigeria and issues that asset. XOF is something that's actually coming online as well. And there is also another anchor that's coming on in Tanzania. So they will issue an asset there as well. So there are opportunities for all of these assets to be live and on Stellar. And again, it takes literally 2 lines of code to be able to make this happen. But we at the Stellar Development Foundation spend a lot of time with, and these are all free services from us because, again, we're a nonprofit just focused on development of the network. So any entity that would like to become an anchor on the Stellar network, you can do it without talking to us. We hope that the documentation out there is awesome and easy for you to use. But if you really wanted help and assistance to be able to issue assets or to become a send or receive anchor, we're available for any support that you may have. But any asset can be available on Stellar.
That's great. You mentioned anchor. So someone is asking the question here, what are the requirements for being an anchor on the Stellar network?
Yeah, so we don't set requirements to be an anchor on the network, but I'll tell you that the local regulators do. And here's why. Anytime you're touching fiat, whether you're touching fiat as an on or off ramp, they know how to regulate fiat. And so the regulators have indicated that financial institutions should be the only institutions that have the ability to touch fiat. And so the local regulations will determine what you need, what the requirements are for you to be an anchor in terms of like whether you can touch the fiat as an on and on ramp. But for us, we just want you to be able to understand how the network operates, and we'll help you to do that. You have to have the licenses and whatnot for your region. But other than that, there's not a whole lot that's required for anchor work.
Talking about license, actually, and I think I'm going to tag it along with another question that I see here. Is there any requirement from the central bank to support any local currency and using the Stellar network? And I suppose when you're referring to the license, could you perhaps enlighten me as to what type of a license we're looking for here?
So it depends on the region. I'll start with the last question first. The local regions are going to set what kind of license that you need to be like a money transmitter or to be to basically it gets back to the point of touching fiat. So anytime you touch fiat, you have license requirements in each of the regions. So those are the licenses that are required. In terms of central banks, there are central banks that are considering issuing like the central bank digital asset, CBDCs. But when you actually issue the asset, so long as you have it backed one-to-one and you want it to be what we call stable coins. So the one-to-one backing in the bank account allows you to be able to issue that asset. So we actually like it when entities put out testaments about where their assets exist and they demonstrate that they do have that one-to-one backing. It's like a really, really powerful thing to build trust with the ecosystem.
Fantastic. So, and a very interesting question here with regards to making a comparison to XRP. Will Stellar be as centralized as XRP?
Without commenting on whether XRP is centralized, the focus that we have is to be decentralized. We're decentralized today. Like the truth of the matter is, we actually run validators for the network, but we believe that we could pull our validators off the network and the network would operate fine, that there's no reason for us to be a part of it, although we do think it's actually valuable for us to stay connected to the network as it is today. You can actually develop a validator and put it on the network without any permission from us. This is how these decentralized exchanges, decentralized networks truly operate. So from our standpoint, the Stellar network is already decentralized. We just focus on making it more and more decentralized. If you think about the fact that we're on this video call right now, this is using the decentralized network of the internet. That's exactly the way that you should think about. This is the decentralized network for payments in the same way.
How supportive are you of the startup ecosystem, and particularly in Africa? Seeing that you're running a foundation and your focus is really to continuously build this entire decentralized network, how supportive really are you with startups, particularly from Africa, that are making use of your network and would love to actually build traction and so forth? How can they unlock some funding off of the foundation?
So we do actually have a funding mechanism. It's called the Enterprise Fund. We actually just announced yesterday, I think it was yesterday, an investment in Cowrie. Cowrie is the Nigerian entity that I spoke about, which is a financial institution there that's issued the NGNT. We believe that Africa is one of the places that actually can utilize this technology in a way to connect so many people to financial infrastructure. So we are very excited about the opportunities that exist there. And from the Enterprise Fund, as well as we do work with, everything is available on our website, by the way. If you go to Mandate and Stellar, so the Mandate, I think it's stellar.mandate.org, you can see that we have Lumen grants for different areas within different things that you can do. One of them is currency support. So we do actually give grants to anchors that as they work to support the currencies that they have. And we had Richard, and I think we have him still. I think he's coming back on.
Richard, hi. Thank you for coming in, Richard. Please unmute yourself and come on live as well, so we can see you, Richard.
Sure.
Richard?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry, I've been facing some technical difficulties. I think it's because of my internet. So I'll just keep the video off for the time being. But my name is Richard Lema. I'm the COO of ClickPesa. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. Yeah.
So Richard, I gave a little bit, like 2 sentences about the work that you guys do, but I would love for you to answer 2 questions if you could. First of all, just explain a little bit about ClickPesa's focus on the SMEs and what you're doing with respect to that, and also to tell us why you built on Stellar.
Sure. Yes, so we saw ClickPesa is essentially a fintech company, and we used to build applications for financial services. In our process and building this, we kind of saw a gap in the market, which is tools for SMEs integrated with payments. So we decided to build a payment platform that's integrated with business tools, specifically focused for SMEs in East Africa. Upon building these tools, we saw there's a demand for payment services, more so for African-based entrepreneurs, business owners, freelancers looking to receive payments from outside of the countries that we operate in. Because of that, we sought to look for cheaper ways to accept payments for these businesses across the globe, since services such as PayPal, etc., don't work within Tanzania. So on our journey, we essentially saw Stellar as an opportunity to offer a cheaper based payment solutions to our merchants. So the ability to collect a payment from across the world, from one integration into Stellar, you have access to multiple partners of ramps across the world. And they're doing a fantastic job in building this network out. And this essentially is cheaper for us and economically viable for our merchants, as the costs become much cheaper to accept payments and settle and merchants within East Africa. I hope I kind of touched on both points.
John, you're muted.
Richard, you certainly did. Sorry about that, guys. Richard, you did indeed, and I'm actually looking into your website. I didn't know you guys were definitely building this out of Tanzania. Well done, and kudos on this work, really. I just have a question that I want to ask as well, perhaps for the audience as well. There, you've chosen Stellar. Is it predominantly because of the lower fees? And okay, Richard has actually left. I'm hoping that he will be back. But perhaps, Denelle, the question is that I'm trying to understand as well, as we were able to accept payments around the world on the network, so on the Stellar network, has liquidity partnership been that easier for you in all the parts of the world to be able to accept the native token of Stellar and settle as fast as possible? I think that would be one of the barriers of actually accelerating the adoption rate as well. Can you explain?
It's a great question. So just importantly, you don't actually have to use XLM, which is the native token on Stellar. It is a bridge currency on the network and happens to have the most liquidity because it is a bridge currency that exists on the network. But you can actually, you never even need to touch the native currency, other than for DDoS and spam, there's a requirement that be part of the transaction fees. So in terms of liquidity, we really focus on that. And so we work with folks like Richard to be able to make sure that there's markets that are made between the assets that they put on the network and in the corridors that they needed to have it for strength. So we'll put market makers to that. We believe that once there's actually more demand in terms of volume, that the markets will make themselves, and that there'll be other liquidity issues that come up to support those markets. But I will tell you that this year, in 2021, this is one of the single most important places for us to focus is on liquidity. So we give liquidity loans to different anchors to be able to support them, and we also work with market makers separately to do that. I don't know, Richard, if you have anything else to add on that point.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so
I was going to touch on the Stellar Dex. As more partners come online, the more liquid the market becomes. And based on how Stellar is built, essentially the different anchors have different access to the market. And as more players come in, more liquidity is available on the market.
Perhaps one last question I would like to take over here. Somebody's asking, is there any real big benefit or huge comparison between ClickPesa and PayPal? I would assume in terms of fees, probably. And also, do we need to be licensed?
Yes.
To be part of the Stellar ecosystem? Suppose we answered that question already, but yeah, please go on.
Yes, I mean, regulations do play a big part in implementation of financial services or payment-based systems across the globe. And it is an educative role that we take with financial institutions, explaining the distributed ledger system and the networks such as Stellar. But in East Africa, more so than probably other parts of the world, we understand the value of innovation with regards to payment systems, with systems such as M-Pesa. So we have a regulatory environment that is conducive and open, purely because of the impact they've experienced with services such as M-Pesa. So this is it's been a very supportive role. It's a slow process.
Okay, definitely bandwidth lagging there
so
for Richard.
it's an exciting time.
I have one last question for Richard, but I believe you might be able to answer that, Denelle. Has there been any highly restrictive areas to actually penetration in Tanzania with the central banks or other institutions wanting to use ClickPesa? I mean, was that easier for them to understand the importance of faster transaction settlement, lower fees, and digitally signing all these transactions on a Stellar network and blockchain technology, considering that crypto has a somewhat certain connotation in Africa and around the world?
Yeah, so I think part of this is that, and what we spend a lot of time on is working with regulators and central banks all over the world to have to explain to them the value that blockchain can bring to their constituents. So that basically thinking like if they don't get into blockchain and allow blockchain within their borders, what are they missing out on? That's how we like to think about it. So the central banks, again, do not have to be involved in an entity like ClickPesa when ClickPesa has the one-to-one backing for its stablecoin. The central banks would have to be involved if the central bank wanted to issue the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, which we would love to be able to engage with central banks, and we do with central banks all over the world on this very issue. So I think that, in terms of it's the speed, it's the scale, and most importantly, we at Stellar, the Stellar network is not used to get rid of the existing financial infrastructure. It's only used to connect it. And so I think that that's a really important part of how we engage with these central banks in Tanzania as well as all over the world. So I think, Richard's organization is a fully licensed institution, financial institution in Tanzania. And that's important. Again, if you're going to touch fiat, you got to get your licenses in order to do that. And I think that then we can work with central banks and all the regulators in these regions to really get them comfortable with the value that this is bringing to their local constituents.
Denelle, for you, last question for me, and I think we're going to close on this. Do you see a better adoption of the Stellar network or protocol across the US, or do you see a better use case in places like Africa and other third world countries? What would you say on that?
Yeah, so I have to say, like, there's adoption globally, but and there are unbanked and underbanked folks globally. So I don't want to undercut the folks that exist in the US that also are underbanked or unbanked. But I will say that this technology is actually particularly useful on the cross-border nature. So if you think about Africa and Latin America, and even in India, although there are challenges in India because of regulations, these are perfect countries and regions to be able to develop this kind of technology. So anywhere where people don't have access to financial institutions right down the street, this allows them to have it on their mobile device and to hold value on their mobile device and transact in that. So that is useful anywhere, but particularly useful in developing regions.
Beautiful. Denelle, Richard, I really appreciate for your time for this contribution. Thank you very much again for being a part of this awesome event.